The Soviet ship could see the Hughes Glomar Explorer floating almost motionless in the Pacific, but it could not see what was descending beneath it. Hidden inside a vessel supposedly built to mine the ocean floor, an enormous mechanical capture vehicle was being lowered through a secret opening in the hull. Steel pipe was added section by section, carrying the machine downward into darkness. Its destination lay more than 3 miles below, a lost Soviet ballistic missile submarine that Moscow had failed to find. If the cover story collapsed, the United States would be caught attempting one of the most audacious intelligence operations of the Cold War. But even if the Soviets remained convinced, the operation could still fail. The Americans first had to reach the wreck, grip a shattered section weighing thousands of tons, and lift it through 16,500 feet of ocean without breaking it apart. The CIA had spent 6 years building a ship for this single moment. Now Soviet observers were nearby. The lifting system was under immense strain, and the greatest danger was still hidden on the seabed. The target was K-129, a Soviet Golf II-class diesel-electric submarine armed with 3 ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. In early 1968, it departed the Soviet naval base at Petropavlovsk on the Kamchatka Peninsula for a patrol in the Pacific. Then, it disappeared. No confirmed distress call explained what had happened. The submarine failed to communicate, failed to return, and took its entire crew with it. Soviet naval forces began an extensive search, sending ships and aircraft across a vast section of ocean. But the Pacific concealed the answer beneath miles of water, and the searchers did not know exactly where to look. After weeks of effort, Moscow eventually abandoned the search without locating the wreck. The United States, however, possessed a clue the Soviets did not. American sensors had recorded unusual acoustic events in the Pacific around the time K-129 vanished. Analysts compared the information and narrowed the possible location. The Navy then sent USS Halibut, a nuclear-powered submarine modified for special intelligence missions, into the search area. Halibut was not looking for a moving target. It was attempting to find a broken vessel on an enormous seabed where even a full-size submarine could disappear into the landscape. Using deep-towed equipment and repeated photographic passes, the American crew searched the darkness. In August 1968, after an exhausting hunt, images finally revealed the wreck of K-129. The Soviets had lost their submarine. The Americans now knew where it was. That discovery immediately created a more dangerous question. K-129 might contain missiles, nuclear warheads, cryptographic equipment, code material, and examples of Soviet naval technology. Any surviving component could reveal how Soviet strategic submarines operated and communicated. Yet the wreck rested approximately 16,500 feet below the surface, about 1,800 miles northwest of Hawaii. At that depth, water pressure was crushing. Visibility was almost non-existent, and the nearest assistance was far away. No salvage operation had ever attempted to raise anything comparable. Finding K-129 had been extraordinary. Recovering it appeared impossible. The possibility was too valuable to dismiss. The Department of Defense studied options before the Central Intelligence Agency assumed leadership of the recovery effort. Engineers examined concepts that ranged from underwater vehicles to lifting systems, but every proposal collided with the same brutal facts. The target was enormous, the depth unprecedented, and the entire mission had to remain concealed from the Soviet Union. A conventional naval salvage fleet would immediately advertise American interest in that precise patch of ocean. Even a technically successful operation could trigger a confrontation if Moscow realized that the United States was attempting to seize one of its strategic submarines. By 1970, the project team reached a conclusion that sounded more like fiction than engineering. The only practical method was to build a massive surface ship, lower a mechanical capture vehicle to the bottom, close powerful claws around a large section of K-129, and lift the wreck into a concealed chamber inside the ship. The recovery target was estimated at approximately 132 feet long and 1,750 tons. The lifting system would also have to support miles of steel pipe and the capture vehicle itself. Nothing on the surface could appear military. The ship had to remain stable over one position for weeks, survive Pacific currents and weather, and perform the entire recovery below the waterline where cameras and Soviet observers could not see it. But constructing such a vessel would create another problem. A ship of that size, cost, and unusual design could not simply appear without explanation. Reporters, shipbuilders, maritime companies, and foreign intelligence services would ask what it was for. The CIA therefore needed more than machinery. It needed a believable story. The answer was Howard Hughes. The billionaire industrialist already possessed a reputation for ambitious aviation projects, secrecy, and unconventional ideas. With his cooperation, the vessel would be presented as a commercial deep-sea mining ship. Its public mission was to collect valuable manganese nodules from the Pacific floor. That explanation justified a ship capable of lowering heavy equipment to extreme depths. It also transformed strange engineering features from evidence of espionage into signs of a new mining industry. The vessel received a name that would eventually become inseparable from government secrecy: Hughes Glomar Explorer. The cover story had to survive close inspection, so the ship could not merely resemble a mining vessel from a distance. Global Marine oversaw the maritime side of the project, while specialized contractors developed systems that had never existed before. The Glomar Explorer received a tall central derrick, hydraulic lifting machinery, a pipe transfer system, and enough 60-foot sections of steel pipe to reach the seabed. Inside the hull was a vast center docking well known as the moon pool. Doors beneath it could open to the ocean, allowing the capture vehicle and any recovered section of K-129 to enter the ship without becoming visible from outside. The capture vehicle was itself a secret construction project. Built by Lockheed, it weighed roughly 4 million pounds and used enormous mechanical claws designed to close around the wreck. It could not be installed openly at a normal pier. Instead, the machine was concealed aboard a submersible barge. The barge moved beneath the Glomar Explorer and positioned the capture vehicle under the moon pool so it could be drawn inside from below. Many people working near the project could see only fragments of the system. Compartmentalization protected the mission, but thousands of components designed by separate teams still had to work together perfectly in the Pacific. The project also faced resistance inside the American government. Costs continued rising, the technical odds remained uncertain, and senior officials questioned whether the intelligence return justified the diplomatic risk. CIA Director Richard Helms defended the operation, and President Richard Nixon ultimately permitted it to proceed, but only after his 1974 visit to Moscow. American leaders were negotiating with the Soviet Union while preparing, in secret, to lift one of its missile submarines from the ocean floor. By June 1974, the ship and its systems were ready. The Glomar Explorer left Long Beach and sailed toward the isolated coordinates where K-129 rested. To the outside world, the voyage represented the beginning of a revolutionary commercial experiment. To the men who knew the truth, it was the point at which years of planning became irreversible. Once the ship reached the site, mechanical failure, severe weather, or Soviet interference could expose everything. The Glomar Explorer arrived over K-129 on July 4th. The date carried obvious symbolism, but there was little room for celebration. The crew had to hold a ship more than 600 feet long over a specific point in open ocean while lowering machinery through miles of moving water. Positioning systems constantly adjusted the vessel against wind and current. Beneath the moon pool, doors opened into the Pacific. The capture vehicle began its descent as the crew added one steel pipe section after another to the growing vertical column. Then Soviet vessels appeared. Their crews could observe the Glomar Explorer, photograph it, circle it, and ask questions. They could not see through the hull, but their presence transformed every difficulty into a potential crisis. The Americans continued behaving like civilian mining specialists. Equipment had to be handled without revealing its military purpose. Communications and routines had to support the commercial cover. If the Soviet observers concluded that the ship was positioned over K-129, they could demand that it leave, interfere with the operation, or call for reinforcements. American naval forces were too distant to provide immediate protection without exposing the mission further. On July 21st, the crew began the long process of lowering the capture vehicle. Every 60-foot pipe section carried it farther down and added more weight to the system. The completed marine riser would weigh millions of pounds. Small errors at the surface could become enormous deviations at the bottom. Currents could push the suspended machinery away from the target. A failed connection could send years of work falling into the abyss. The operation required constant measurement and adjustment, Yet there was no simple way to stop and repair major equipment once it was thousands of feet beneath the ship. At last, the capture vehicle reached the seabed. Cameras and sensors guided it toward the section of K-129 selected for recovery. The submarine had not landed intact in a convenient position. It was damaged, partly buried, and weakened by 6 years under extreme pressure. The claws had to move around the hull and find purchase without crushing or pushing the wreck beyond reach. The Glomar Explorer had crossed oceans and survived Soviet observation, but the mission could still end with the capture vehicle closing on empty sediment. The jaws moved into position. They closed around K-129. On August 1st, the lift began. The Glomar Explorer reversed the process that had carried the machine downward. One by one, crews raised and removed the steel pipe sections. Far below, the capture vehicle carried a section of submarine weighing roughly 4 million pounds. The combined suspended load placed extraordinary stress on the system. Progress was slow because speed could generate movement and shock that the damaged hull could not withstand. After each stage, the submarine remained invisible. The crew could monitor instruments, loads, and machinery, but no one could simply look over the side and confirm that the target was safe. For days, the wreck climbed through the Pacific. The Soviet ships still did not intervene. The mining deception had carried the operation past the moment many planners feared most. K-129 was no longer resting on the seabed. Part of it was moving upward under American control. If the section reached the moon pool, the CIA would gain access to a Soviet ballistic missile submarine without Moscow even knowing it had been found. Then the load changed. On August 4th, with the submarine partway to the surface, portions of the capture system failed under the strain. Several claws lost their hold. The weakened wreck began to break apart. Inside the Glomar Explorer, instruments revealed the disaster before anyone could see it. A large part of K-129 slipped from the capture vehicle and fell back toward the ocean floor. Years of planning, immense expense, and one of the most sophisticated machines ever placed at sea could not stop it. The section containing many of the items the intelligence community most wanted may have been among the material lost in the descent. But the failure was not complete. Part of the wreck remained inside the surviving claws. The crew now faced a different calculation. The original objective had broken apart, the capture vehicle had suffered damage, and the remaining load might also be unstable, yet abandoning it would erase the last possibility of recovering anything. The lift continued. Each removed pipe section brought the damaged machine closer to the hidden doors beneath the ship. The Soviet observers remained outside, unaware that the operation had nearly collapsed below them. By August 7th, the surviving section entered the moon pool. The doors closed beneath it, concealing the recovered wreck inside the Glomar Explorer. Only then could members of the project examine what the capture vehicle had brought back. Exactly what intelligence was obtained has never been fully disclosed. Claims that particular codebooks, missiles, or nuclear warheads were recovered often go beyond the confirmed public record. What is documented is that the mission retrieved a portion of K-129 and that 6 Soviet submariners were found within it. The Americans treated those men not as trophies of an intelligence victory, but as sailors lost at sea. Their remains were placed in containers, covered with the Soviet naval ensign, and given a formal military burial. The ceremony included prayers and the Soviet national anthem before the remains were committed to the Pacific. In 1992, CIA Director Robert Gates presented Russian President Boris Yeltsin with a film of the burial. It was a solemn human consequence of an operation otherwise defined by machinery, secrecy, and strategic competition. The Glomar Explorer sailed away with its partial prize, and for a brief period, the secret survived. CIA planners began considering a second mission to recover the section that had fallen. The engineers had learned from the first attempt, the ship already existed, and the most valuable part of K-129 might still be waiting below. But a threat had appeared before the Glomar Explorer even left California, and it had nothing to do with Soviet intelligence. In June 1974, thieves broke into an office connected to the Hughes organization in Los Angeles. Among the stolen material was a document linking Howard Hughes, the CIA, and the Glomar Explorer. The agency wanted the document recovered, so the FBI and the Los Angeles Police Department became involved. The investigation attracted attention. Reporters began hearing fragments of an extraordinary story. the famous mining ship might have been built to recover a Soviet submarine. The secrecy that had survived engineering failures, thousands of workers, an ocean crossing and direct Soviet observation now began unraveling because of an ordinary burglary. By early 1975, newspapers were preparing reports. The government attempted to limit publication, warning that disclosure could damage national security and provoke a confrontation with the Soviet Union. Some organizations delayed, others did not. On March 18th, investigative reporter Jack Anderson broadcast the story nationally. The cover was gone. The revelation ended realistic hopes for a second recovery. Soviet vessels could now guard the location, and any return by the Glomar Explorer would be recognized immediately. What remained of K-129 would stay on the ocean floor. The operation had succeeded in reaching an impossible depth and recovering part of the target, but the mechanical failure had denied the CIA its complete prize, and the press exposure prevented another attempt. Yet the final twist came after the mission itself. When journalists sought CIA records about the Glomar Explorer, the government faced a problem. Confirming that documents existed would acknowledge the operation. Denying their existence could also reveal classified information. The agency therefore adopted a formulation that would become famous in intelligence and freedom of information law. It would neither confirm nor deny the existence of the requested records. The phrase became known as the Glomar response. A ship built to conceal an operation beneath the Pacific had given its name to a method of concealing information for decades afterward. Project Azorian did not achieve every objective. Most of the targeted section fell back into the abyss, and the full intelligence return remains undisclosed. But the United States located a submarine the Soviet Union could not find, constructed a unique recovery ship behind a commercial cover, lowered a massive capture vehicle more than 3 miles, and lifted part of a strategic submarine while Soviet vessels watched. The operation demonstrated that espionage could require shipyards, engineers, analysts, submariners, heavy lift operators, and a billionaire willing to lend his name to an industrial illusion. Every visible feature of the Glomar Explorer supported the lie, while its most important machinery operated where no observer could see it. In July 1974, the Soviet ships watching the Glomar Explorer believed they were observing an experiment in deep-sea mining. They did not know that a fragment of their own lost submarine was rising beneath them. The CIA had built an entire ship to steal a secret from the bottom of the ocean. It reached the target, lost much of it at the moment of triumph, recovered what remained, and concealed the truth until an unrelated crime finally brought the operation into public view. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Subscribe to DWWA and turn on notifications for more extraordinary stories of espionage, hidden operations, and the people who changed history at sea.